I credited those I feel deserve to be included. Many were priceless characters, some of whom could scarcely read or write, but who blossomed with their knowledge of equipment or their understanding of the young soldiers under them in the structure of tactical command. They were the heart of the Army as I knew it, and as far as I am concerned, the NCOs of today are holding up their end beautifully. Brian Sobel has taken our history and spun an excellent yarn, gathering into it many of my own experiences in my Army assignments, weaving in some of the characters I had the privilege of meeting or knowing, from John J. Pershing to Haile Selassie and Manfred Rommel. He has included them appropriately and described them with caring skill. Although this book is Brian's, as its subject, I appreciate his letting me acknowledge some of the people who encouraged me to let him write it, and to grant him the interviews and assemble the materials he would require. My wife Joanne ranks first among this group. Our daughters, Mother Margaret Georgina Patton, OSB, and Helen Patton Pluschik, and our sons, George Patton Jr., Robert Holbrook Patton, and Benjamin Wilson Patton, cheered the effort on, and made me feel it was work worth supporting. Brian Sobel made it so. George S. Patton, Major General, U.S. Army, retired. Owner, Green Meadows Farm, February 1997. Preface. On the north shore of Massachusetts, a short distance from Boston, is the town of Hamilton, named for the early American statesman Alexander Hamilton. With a population of just over 6,000 residents, the community retains the look of its colonial past, with expansive estates and meadows that seem to roll on endlessly. In the center of Hamilton is a park, guarded silently by a tank and named after the famous American general George S. Patton, Jr. Patton Memorial Park is but one element of the family presence in town. For a couple of miles away, near the end of a tree-lined country lane, resides retired Major General George Smith Patton, son of the famous World War II hero. The Patton who lives with his family in Hamilton today, like his father before him, is a tough-talking man and a student of military history and history in general. Although retired from the Army, he remains the consummate West Pointer and general, more in the mold of his father than perhaps even he is willing to admit. This Patton is also a proven combat soldier and leader of men who had to carry the burden of his old man's triumphs and failures and not allow it to affect his life or military career. Patton is a physically large man, white-haired now, with a resemblance to his father's pictures. His sister, the late Ruth Ellen Patton Totten, once said, "If he doesn't look exactly like our dad, he sure feels like him. He exudes an aura of our father very, very much. Many of his gestures are the same." George Patton is a 34-year Army veteran who admits crying at the loss of his men in battle, and yet once saluted an enemy soldier in a way only a professional military man could understand. He fought, was wounded, won medals, and would have gladly perished to preserve the American dream. Today, he commercially farms his family estate and spends time speaking with people about his military career, his life and times, and the special place he holds in history because of the Patton name. Joanne Patton has been married to the general for 45 years. She is a gentlewoman, soft-spoken and well-educated. Her attachment to history by marriage to Patton's son has been an exhilarating ride, a life that, by her own admission, took great adjustment in the beginning. She has often served as a buffer for the general, rounding out what some perceive as his abrupt, no-nonsense manner. The Pattons had 5 children. Today, George Jr. works on his father's farm. Margaret is Mother Margaret Georgina, a Benedictine nun. Robert is a writer. Helen and Benjamin, the youngest, are pursuing their own careers in theater and the environment, respectively. The Patton home one finds in Hamilton was purchased by George S. Patton, Jr. in 1928. It was really country at that time, and my mother fixed it up and added a wing in 1939, his son recalls. When we came, the house had no electric lights, and the road out front was gravel. Today, the 2-story, white-frame house sits comfortably behind a long, high hedge that shields the front of the house and part of the 200 surrounding acres. Above the front door is a gold-painted metal eagle and an American flag on a pole, lighted at night, reminding all who enter that this is a house of patriotic values. Joanne points out, the house has history and personality. Everything has a story. While the Pattons over the years have donated historically important family artifacts to various museums, the house is still replete with furniture from different historical periods and geographical areas, pictures highlighting the careers of both Pattons, plus a library containing hundreds of books informally shelved by subject. One may discover travel books on various countries and others that detail the great battles that shaped the world. The basic military theme even extends to the outdoors, for just through the back porch screen is a cannon from the days of the Spanish Main, guarding a picturesque meadow and pond. The cannon was brought back from Casablanca by General George S. Patton, Jr. during World War II. At one time, the basement of the home alone held over 50 metal filing cases filled with the late general's personal papers. The amount was staggering, says Joanne. It was a hell of a thing, comments Patton. 95% of the items have been sent to the Patton Museum in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Most of my dad's memorabilia is there. His collection of rare books and papers went to West Point and to the Library of Congress. The Patton military heritage has roots traveling back to the Civil War and even before. Leaders of all ranks can be traced within the family. The first recorded Patton in America, Robert, settled in Fredericksburg, Virginia, in the 1770s. One of Robert's sons, John Mercer Patton, in turn had 9 sons of his own, one of whom he named George Smith Patton. Born in 1833, this Patton, 19 years later, graduated from the Virginia Military Institute. As a Confederate colonel in the Civil War, he received a mortal wound while in command of the 22nd Virginia Infantry. He was killed at the Third Battle of Winchester, says his great-grandson, in something known as Sheridan's Ride. It was really one of the last campaigns of the war. In addition to George Patton, several of the other Patton sons also fought for the Confederacy. The role of the Patton family in the Civil War would later be a source of inspiration to the young man born in November 1885, who would rise to become one of the greatest fighting generals in history. As the child of an increasingly famous military personage, the George Patton who was born in 1923 received great exposure to the military world. Once, for example, he was pulled out of school by his father to see T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia, who, as a soldier in World War I, had helped the Arabs defeat the Turks. Another time, George was released to see Henri Patton, the French marshal and savior of the Verdun Front in the First World War. As a child, George also met many prominent people who came to visit, among them the famous General John J. Blackjack Pershing and the aviator Eddie Rickenbacker, who, as the top flying ace for the United States, shot down 22 planes and 4 balloons in World War I. As a boy, George Patton would revel in his father's military historical knowledge, on a few occasions even going to the site of a Civil War battle and analyzing the terrain. "I would stand where, say, Grumble Jones had his division," recalls Patton. "My sister would be where A.P. Hill's division was located, and we would try to evaluate the distances, which were not very great in those days." In keeping with family tradition, Patton attended a military academy when he became eligible. Like his father, he attended West Point, and also like his father, soon found himself in academic trouble. "I got a letter from my dad," says Patton. He wrote, "I understand you've been found deficient in math, and for that you're going to poop school for remedial instruction. take the re-entry exam, and then repeat.